She didn't see me place it there. To be fair, I didn't think I was going to. I wasn't planning anything that night. No confrontation, no drama. I didn't even want to be there. But I stood at that corner table with a lukewarm cup of punch and a plate of untouched hummus, watching her laugh with people I didn't recognize, wearing a dress I'd never seen, in a house I never liked. The music was too loud. The kind of fake fun loud that hides conversations people don't want overheard. The room felt stretched, like everyone was pretending to be closer than they actually were. She was across the room, spinning in slow motion under string lights someone had probably spent an hour adjusting. Her hair bounced with every laugh. I remember thinking, she's too happy. And not in the nice way. In the wrong way. The kind of happy that feels like a cover-up. You don't smile like that unless you're hiding something under the floorboards of your soul. Then I saw the bag, slouched casually next to a tipped-over paper plate by the couch. She had set it down to dance. Unzipped. Unguarded. And that was when I did it. I didn't even hesitate. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper that had someone else's handwriting on it. I don't know whose. I found it earlier that day in a library book I never meant to check out. I swear to God, it said exactly what I needed it to say. Don't. That's it. Just that one word. All caps. Ink slightly smudged like it had been written in a hurry. I didn't write it. I didn't need to. The universe did it for me. I slipped it into the side pocket of her purse like I was returning a borrowed secret. Then I walked away. I didn't plan to stay long. I just wanted to see if she'd find it. I was halfway down the hallway toward the guest bathroom when I heard her gasp. Not a loud gasp. A small, sharp one, like a paper cut to the soul. When I turned back, she was staring into her purse with her lips parted and her fingers frozen mid-dig. For a moment, it looked like the floor dropped under her. She looked around slowly, first right, then left, as if she expected to see someone standing there holding a smoking gun. Then she saw me. Our eyes locked. Just for a second. She blinked once. Twice. And then, she smiled. That's what scared me the most. She smiled like nothing happened. Like she hadn't just read a note that shattered the mirror she danced in front of all night. She walked over to her friends again. Laughed a little harder. Drank a little faster. Kissed someone on the cheek I didn't recognize. But her eyes? They never returned to me. Not once. And that's when I knew, whatever was happening with her, it was already way beyond me. And it wasn't over. You'd think something like that, finding a note like that, would lead to a meltdown. A scream, a slap, a drink thrown across the room, right? That's what happens in movies. But no. Cammy just carried on like she hadn't seen a message that completely rewrote her evening. And that terrified me. Because if she didn't panic, it meant she already knew. Whatever she had done, was doing, she wasn't afraid of being caught. Not anymore. She was past the fear. She was in that other zone. The one where guilt hardens into something colder. Where people stop trying to hide the fire and start dancing in the smoke. The rest of the night blurred. I couldn't talk to anyone. I think Leslie asked me something about a Spotify playlist and I just nodded. I went outside and stood near the fence where the string lights didn't quite reach. Every time I looked back through the glass door, Cammy was smiling. But the smile was thinner now. Like she was performing for someone who wasn't there. Or maybe trying to convince herself that nothing had shifted. That her purse hadn't spoken. Then came the moment that really burned itself into me. The man with the linen shirt. He showed up late, around 10:45. Most people were already buzzed and softer at the edges. I watched Cammy spot him the second he stepped through the door. Her posture changed. She straightened. Smoothed her dress. Swallowed hard. For the first time all night, she looked nervous. Not scared. Not guilty. Nervous. That's what crushed me. Because nervous means excited. I watched her pretend not to notice him. He didn't rush to her. He greeted a few people, made his way to the drink table. She circled the room. She circled. Like a shark in heels, casually getting closer. It was like watching the beginning of a secret. I moved to the hallway and stood behind a coat rack. It was stupid and dramatic and yes, I know, pathetic. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. They met by the fridge. She said something. He smiled. She laughed too hard. Then he tucked a piece of her hair behind her ear. Just like that. Bold. Familiar. Like they'd done it 100 times before. I didn't breathe. She leaned in. Close. Close enough to whisper. He leaned back with a grin and said something I couldn't hear. She froze. Tilted her head. Then looked straight toward the bag. Her purse. She whispered something else, sharp and quick. His smile faded. His eyes locked on her bag. His brows lifted. Then they both looked around. He scanned the hallway. I ducked like a damn coward. My heart jackhammered against my ribs. They knew. They knew someone had seen them. They didn't know who. But they knew the game had changed. I waited another minute, then slipped out the front door. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't take a drink. I didn't even put my shoes fully on. I walked barefoot down the cold driveway, got in my car, and sat there in silence with my forehead on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I whispered the question out loud. Who wrote the note? Because that was the part one hadn't even started to process. I hadn't written it. I found it. So why did it hit her like a bullet to the chest? What did she think it referred to? What else had she done? That's when it hit me. The note didn't scare her. It reminded her. I couldn't sleep that night. I just lay there in the dark, watching headlights skate across the ceiling like ghosts, and every time I blinked, I saw Cammie's face when she opened the purse. That single flicker of recognition, that mechanical smile that followed. It was rehearsed. Too fast. Too specific. I kept whispering it to myself like it would explain anything. She recognized the note. But how? I didn't write it. I hadn't told anyone about it. I hadn't even meant to find it. It just appeared, tucked into page 214 of a book about maritime disasters I pulled off the bottom shelf at the library on Wednesday, while killing time before a dentist appointment. I only opened the book because it had a cracked spine. That was the only reason. And there it was. Just one word. Don't. No signature. No context. Just sharp, jagged letters in dark blue ink. The way the letters leaned forward made it feel urgent. Like it had been written quickly, maybe angrily, by someone who didn't care if it smudged. I hadn't even told Cammie about it. I slipped it into my wallet without thinking. I just liked the weirdness of it. But now I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. Her face. Her nervous laughter. Her sudden fear. Not because I caught her, but because something, or someone, had reached through time and tapped her on the shoulder. The next morning, I didn't ask her about it. I didn't mention the party. I watched her make coffee in her robe like everything was fine. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted anything from Trader Joe's. I said I was fine. She smiled, told me she loved me, and walked out the door. 5 minutes later, I followed her. I felt like an idiot. Like some dime store private investigator trailing his own wife through suburban traffic. I kept 4 cars behind. She didn't go to Trader Joe's. She drove past it without even slowing down. She didn't even glance at it in the mirror. She ended up at a bookstore on West Elm. Not one of those polished chains with crisp lighting and a Starbucks in the corner. No, this was one of those cramped little shops with dusty air and handwritten signs that say, "Please don't reshelve," and "Cash only." I parked across the street and waited. She was inside for exactly 9 minutes. When she came out, she wasn't carrying a bag. No receipt. No book. But she looked pale. Shaken. She got back into her car, sat there for a moment gripping the steering wheel like it was the last stable thing in her life, and then drove away. I didn't follow her this time. I walked into the bookstore instead. Inside, it smelled like old paper and forgotten memories. A small bell jingled above the door, and an older woman with a pixie haircut looked up from behind the counter with the kind of disinterest only decades of customers could produce. I wandered the aisles, pretending to browse. I had no idea what I was even looking for, until I saw the wall. Tucked in the back corner, behind a shelf of used mystery novels, was a small corkboard. Thumbtacked to it were dozens, maybe hundreds, of little slips of paper. Notes, messages, quotes, scribbles. I got closer. They were all anonymous. Some were funny. Love is just Stockholm Syndrome with better lighting. Some were dark. He never found the body. Some were confessions. I kissed my best friend's husband the night before their wedding. And one of them, near the bottom right corner, was familiar. Same ink. Same handwriting. Don't. And right beneath it, another, in the same hand. He doesn't know? Yet. I stood there for what felt like hours. Someone had been leaving messages here. More than one. And Cammie had come to this place the morning after that party. She hadn't picked up a book. She hadn't browsed. She'd come here for a reason. Not to shop, but to check. To make sure something hadn't changed. To see if a secret was still buried. Or maybe, if someone had dug it up. I turned to the woman behind the counter and asked, "Do people come here to leave those? On the wall?" She shrugged. "Yeah, local thing. Been doing it for years. Mostly harmless. Kind of like a diary with a thumbtack." "Do people ever respond to each other?" She looked up at me for the first time. "Sometimes." Then she smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. Usually when they've been caught. The woman at the bookstore had that look in her eyes. The kind of look you only give someone when you know something they don't, and you're wondering if you should feel sorry for them or just walk away. I stood there, frozen, with 100 thumbtacked secrets staring at me, and for the first time in this entire bizarre unraveling, I realized I didn't just suspect something. I knew. The note I found in that library book wasn't some random coincidence. It wasn't fate or paranoia or overthinking. It was part of something real, something ongoing. And Cammy was in it, up to her neck. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car outside the bookstore for nearly an hour, rereading the 2 notes I'd copied down in my notebook. Don't. He doesn't know. Yet. The second one felt more personal. Like it was about me. Like someone knew I'd be reading it eventually. I didn't confront her that day. When I walked through the front door that evening, she was on the couch watching a reality show I couldn't stand, eating a salad she hadn't made herself. There were no signs of guilt, no cracks in her armor, just the soft glow of the TV and the rhythm of someone who wasn't afraid of being caught. And honestly, I started to wonder if she wanted me to catch her. If this whole breadcrumb trail wasn't just coincidence but deliberate. A slow leak of truth, meant to trickle under my skin and drive me to madness. And it was working. God, it was working. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. Around 1:30 a.m., when her breathing turned rhythmic and soft, I slipped out of bed, grabbed my keys, and drove back to the bookstore. The building was locked. Of course it was. But I didn't need inside. I needed the wall. From outside, through the glass, I could just barely see the corner where the notes hung. The moonlight didn't reach that far, and the store's lights were long dead, but my phone's flashlight helped. I pressed it to the window and scanned. Nothing new. Then I noticed the shadow. Not on the wall. On the sidewalk. Someone was behind me. I turned fast, heart in my throat. But no one was there. Just a flicker, like someone had ducked around the corner of the building. I followed. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just the quiet hum of streetlights and a breeze that felt colder than it should have in May. But when I came back to my car, something had changed. There was a note on my windshield. It was written in the same handwriting as the others. No envelope. No greeting. Just one sentence. You're not supposed to be reading this. I stood there for several minutes, the paper shaking in my hand. I turned in circles, checking every rooftop, every alley, every parked car nearby. But the street was dead. Empty. Like someone had dropped the note from a crack in the sky and vanished. That should have been enough to make me stop. But it wasn't. Because now, it wasn't just about Cammy. It was about me. I was in it now. Whoever was leaving these notes, they weren't just watching her. They were watching us. And I think I'd already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I didn't sleep after finding the note on my windshield. How could I? You're not supposed to be reading this. 7 words that circled in my head like a curse. My hands kept returning to the folded paper on my nightstand. I must have opened and closed it 20 times before sunrise. The handwriting was unmistakable. Same pressure in the strokes. Same tilt. And it wasn't Cammy's. So who the hell had been writing them? I knew what I should have done. Thrown it away. Burned it. Pretended it never showed up. But the truth was, I didn't want it to stop. Something inside me was addicted to the unraveling. Every lie I uncovered felt like a small piece of freedom. Like I was clawing my way out of a lie I'd been living in without even knowing it. So I went back to the bookstore the next day, right when it opened. The pixie-haired woman was behind the counter again, sipping something dark out of a chipped mug with a picture of a cat wearing glasses. She glanced up when I walked in and gave the smallest of nods. I was wondering if you'd come back, she said, like she'd been expecting me. I didn't bother pretending I was there to shop. The notes on the wall. Do people ever talk back? Her eyes didn't move from her mug. Sometimes. I waited. She didn't offer more. So I pushed. Has anyone ever left one mint for someone specific? She finally looked at me, but her expression didn't change. You'd be surprised how many people walk around hoping someone's writing about them. Sometimes it's real. Most of the time it's projection. I pulled out the windshield note and placed it on the counter between us. Her eyes dropped to it. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask where I got it. Instead, she slid open the drawer beneath the counter and pulled out a tiny square of paper, unfolded, blank, along with a dull red pencil. Write one, she said. What? Whatever you're trying to figure out. Write it down. Pin it to the board. Sometimes you get an answer. Sometimes you don't. I hesitated, then scribbled one word. Why? I walked it over and thumbtacked it in the dead center of the wall. The paper fluttered slightly in the draft from the air vent. I stood there, staring at it for too long, then turned to leave. But just before I stepped outside, the woman called after me. "You should check the mailboxes." I turned back. "What mailboxes?" She pointed through the side window. "Next door. The old apartment complex. Most of it's empty now. People still slip notes through the boxes. Some folks don't like making things public." That was all I needed. I walked around the side of the building until I reached the small alleyway where the apartment complex shared a cracked brick wall with the bookstore. There were 12 metal mailboxes lined up crookedly against the wall, half rusted shut, some with names scratched off. I opened a few randomly. Dust, cobwebs, junk flyers. Nothing. Then, in box number 7, folded and wedged behind a pizza coupon. Another note. Same ink. Same writing. This one wasn't vague. It said, "Stop following her. You don't want to see where she goes." My blood ran cold. They knew. Whoever was writing these wasn't just watching me. They were watching her. Closely enough to know I'd been tailing her car. Closely enough to know I'd been at the bookstore. And now they were trying to steer me away. But instead of scaring me, it did the opposite. It told me I was getting close. I memorized the names on the nearby mailboxes and took a picture of the layout just in case. Then I walked around the building again, this time watching windows. Most were dark or covered in blankets. But one, 3 floors up, had the blinds pulled just far enough to reveal a figure sitting near the glass. A silhouette. Still. Watching. When I blinked, it was gone. And that's when something strange clicked inside me, not panic, not fear. Something colder. Whoever this is, they're not just protecting her. They're protecting a story I was never supposed to read. And I'm not closing the book now. I didn't speak to Cammy for 2 days. Not out of anger. Out of paralysis. Every time I looked at her, every time she smiled or asked if I wanted coffee or curled up beside me on the couch, I felt like I was talking to someone who had rehearsed the role of wife so perfectly that even the pauses in her sentences felt scripted. I kept thinking about the mailbox note. Stop following her. You don't want to see where she goes. I thought about that silhouette in the window, the bookstore clerk's cryptic responses, and most of all, the look on Cammy's face when she read the first note in her bag. She hadn't just been surprised. She'd been reminded, as if someone had whispered something she buried. So I did something I hadn't done before. I checked our Wi-Fi router. Cammy's not tech-savvy. She never thinks about browser histories or network logs. I pulled up the admin dashboard and looked at connected devices over the past month. One stuck out immediately, a phone that had connected several times from a location nearly 2 miles away. Not work. Not any friend's place I knew of. Just labeled Benton Studios guest. I Googled it. It was an old photo studio, supposedly closed during the pandemic, now turned into a private co-working art space. One of those places where people host underground exhibits or do moody photo shoots with neon lighting and broken TVs as props. The next night, I drove there. The building was tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned pet store. The outside looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years, but the front door had a fresh lock and a keypad entry. Around back was a narrow alleyway and a side entrance, where a single security camera blinked lazily above a rusted doorway. I waited until after midnight, when the street emptied, then parked across the road and walked up to the back. The door was unlocked. No sign, no lights. Just silence. Inside, the air smelled like paint thinner and old dust. I stepped slowly through a large open room filled with scattered props, mannequin parts, black drapes, a broken upright piano. In the far corner, a projector faced a brick wall. And then I found it. A small office in the back, mostly cleared out, but a flat-screen monitor still sat on the desk. And it was on. A live feed from the outside security camera played in black and white. I clicked through the buttons and found stored clips. There she was. Cammy. 3 nights ago. Wearing the green dress from the party. She was pacing outside the studio, waiting nervously. She rang the buzzer, looked around. At 9:17 p.m., the door opened. It wasn't the man from the party who let her in. It was someone else. Someone I hadn't seen in 10 years. Marcus. My older brother. I sat down hard in the chair. The air left my lungs like I'd been kicked. I hadn't even spoken to Marcus since our father's funeral. We'd never been close. Growing up, he'd been the golden child, charismatic, reckless, the one who disappeared to LA with a guitar and came back 6 months later with a DUI and a tattoo he couldn't explain. He'd vanished completely after Dad passed. I never even told Cammy the full story. And yet, there he was. opening a door for my wife. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. But the way she walked in, the way he stood aside for her, it was intimate. Familiar. Like they'd done this before. I scrubbed forward in the footage. At 9:24, another angle showed them entering a dark room, lit only by red bulbs. Then, nothing. The feed cut out. I sat there for hours. At some point, I started laughing. Quiet, bitter laughter that bounced off the studio walls like a confession. Because all this time, I thought I was dealing with something abstract, a trail of anonymous notes, secrets scribbled on bookstore walls, strange people watching from windows. But now it had a face. My brother's face. And I didn't know what felt worse, that he was involved. Or that I still didn't know what they were doing together. I didn't tell Cammy where I was going. I didn't leave a note, didn't make up an excuse, didn't even wait for her to leave the house. I just got in the car and drove like my skin was on fire. The entire drive to the studio, I kept picturing Marcus's face, how casual he looked opening that door for her. Like letting my wife into a building I didn't know existed was just part of some long-running joke I'd never been invited to. I hadn't seen him since he vanished. No calls. No texts. He missed our anniversary party. He skipped Mom's second wedding. I'd written him off as a ghost with bad taste in tattoos. And now I was starting to think he hadn't disappeared at all, just stepped behind a curtain and watched from the shadows while my life quietly fell apart. When I arrived at the studio, I didn't knock. The front door was locked, of course, but the side entrance, the one they'd used in the video, wasn't. Same peeling paint. Same busted door frame. I pushed it open and walked into darkness. He was already there. Sitting in the same chair I'd used to watch the footage the night before, facing the monitor, sipping from a mug like this was just another Thursday. Was wondering when you'd show, he said without turning. Took you longer than I expected. That voice. Same as I remembered, lazy, casual, too smooth to be sincere. The kind of voice that made everything sound like it wasn't a big deal, even when it was. I stepped closer. How long has this been going on? He didn't answer right away. Just tapped the mug against the desk twice. Define this. Don't play that game with me. He finally turned, and for a moment, I forgot how much we looked alike, or used to. Same jawline, same eyes, but his were duller now, like something had drained the color out of them and replaced it with static. He leaned back. You think I'm sleeping with your wife? The words landed like a slap, and I flinched, not because he said it, but because he said it without hesitation. No denial. No laugh. Just stated like a fact he wasn't even ashamed of. You're not. I asked, barely above a whisper. He tilted his head. That's the thing. If I say no, you won't believe me. If I say yes, you'll lose your mind. So what's the right answer, Ronan? I took a step forward. The truth. He stared at me for a long time, then stood up slowly. He wasn't taller than me, but he moved like someone who always thought he was in control of the room. She came to me, he said. 3 months ago. Said she needed help. Help with what? He didn't speak. What did she need help with, Marcus? Still silence. That's when I lost it. I grabbed the front of his shirt and shoved him hard against the wall. The mug shattered on the floor. He didn't fight back. Just stared at me, breathing calmly, eyes burning like lit fuses. Tell me, I growled. Fine, he said. But you asked. And then he told me. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to break me in ways I didn't expect. Cammy wasn't sleeping with him. She was protecting him. She discovered something last year, something about a woman Marcus used to date. A woman who went missing in 2019. Police questioned him. He claimed he hadn't seen her in months. There was no evidence. No charges. But Cammy found old photos. One of them with a date stamp that proved Marcus was lying. It didn't show a crime. It didn't prove guilt. But it contradicted his entire statement. And instead of going to the cops, she went to him. She told him she'd stay quiet, as long as he stayed out of trouble. At least, that's what she claimed. And the notes? I asked, pulling away, still shaking. The messages at the bookstore? The one in the purse. Marcus smiled. That wasn't me. That was her. My brain felt like it had skipped a beat. She wrote them. She didn't want to tell you outright. She wanted you to figure it out piece by piece. She thought it'd be gentler. She thought if you chose to dig, you wouldn't hate her when you finally got to the end. I staggered back like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. The bookstore. The weird notes. The secrecy. The silence. It wasn't to hide an affair. It was to hide me from the truth. Marcus stepped closer. She was trying to protect you, Ronan. You always needed things wrapped in nice paper. She didn't want you to break. She was protecting you. I spat. Not me. He didn't deny it. He just turned back to the monitor, picked up a remote, and cued another video clip. "You should go home," he said softly. "Check the back of your closet. Top shelf. There's something she left for you there. If you still want the full story, it's waiting." I didn't say another word. I just walked out of the studio like I was underwater, with one question repeating in my mind louder than anything else. Why did she think I'd have to break? When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that doesn't just sound empty, it sounds waiting. Like the walls knew something I didn't. Like the silence itself was rehearsed. Cammy wasn't there. I checked the garage. Her car was gone. For a second, I thought she'd run. That she'd packed up and disappeared to avoid the fallout, the confrontation, the truth. But then I remembered what Marcus said. The closet. I went upstairs. The top shelf was dusty. I had to stand on a chair and blindly reach behind an old blanket we hadn't used since our trip to Vermont. My fingers hit cardboard. A small, flat box. When I opened it, I didn't find betrayal. I found memories. Inside were photos. Printed ones, the kind no one bothers to make anymore. There were images of me and Cammy from our early years. Us in front of the first apartment, laughing in the rain. Her on my shoulders at the lake, screaming that I was going to drop her. I hadn't even seen some of these before. Tucked underneath the photos was a letter, written in her handwriting. Neat. Deliberate. I sat down on the floor and read. "Ronan, if you're reading this, then everything played out the way I feared it would. I never wanted you to find these things this way, through silence and suspicion. But I knew if I told you everything out loud, you'd try to protect me. Or worse, you'd try to protect Marcus. The truth is, I never hated you. I've never lied about how much I loved you. What I've hidden all of this wasn't because I wanted to hurt you. It was because I was trying to keep something toxic from touching you. Your brother made a mistake years ago. A big one. And I thought if I stayed close, I could keep him from doing something worse. But then it spiraled. The guilt. The fear. I couldn't tell the police because there was no evidence. Just intuition. So I watched him. And when I saw you start to feel the shift, I tried to give you a path. I thought if you figured it out on your own, maybe you'd understand that the lie was never about us. It was about someone else's shadow stretching over our life. And if you do understand, then maybe you'll forgive me. If not, I'll still love you. Always. Even if it's from a distance. Cammy. I didn't move for a while after that. I just sat there with the letter trembling in my hands, the photos spread around me like puzzle pieces I had finally begun to see clearly. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't betrayal. It was a burden she carried alone, because she didn't think I could handle the weight. But she was wrong. I could. Because that's what love is sometimes. Not perfection. Not answers. Just standing in the storm with someone else and saying, "I'm still here." When she came home later that night, she opened the door slowly, like she wasn't sure what world she was walking back into. I met her in the hallway. She froze when she saw me holding the letter. For a moment, we both just stood there in silence. Then I reached out and held her. Not tight. Not desperate. Just steady. "I'm not leaving," I said. Not because I understand everything, but because I understand you. She cried then. Not the quiet kind. The kind that breaks through everything. We didn't talk much that night. We didn't need to. We just sat side by side on the floor, surrounded by old photographs in the beginning of something new. And for the first time in a long, long time, it felt like home again.